Hey everybody, the Coop here today with a tier list that you guys have been requesting. This is our Talisman tier list. The rankings here are meant to be a balance between PvP and PvE, though you'll find that most things that are good for PvP are also good for PvE. An important thing to remember about this tier list is that the more consistent and more universal talismans are always going to end up ranking higher, because being able to use something consistently means that it will provide you with more power over time, even if certain talismans enable specific cool interactions. We're going to start at the bottom, obviously. Datakar's Woe, useless. Most of these down here are self-explanatory. Shabriri's Woe is worth using if you combine it with your Mimic, but other than that, it's not really worth anything, especially not on your main character. The Cat Talisman's not worth using because fall damage is either... Basically, you could ignore fall damage, period, because if you fall too far, you're just auto-dead with or without the Talisman. I think the one in this category that's worth talking about here is the Primal Glintstone Blade. Sometimes I see mage players running this guy. It says spells consume less FP, but maximum HP is reduced. Trading 15% HP for 25% extra FP is just a massive trap. It's not worth the HP reduction, and the FP cost reduction is just not important. We have lots of ways of getting mana back. We have other ways of boosting the mana pool. There's just really no reason to run this in PvP or PvE. In E tier, there ended up being quite a lot of what I would call very niche or situational things. A lot of these in this tier aren't necessarily bad. Like all of these ones here that give you various kinds of status resistances. These can be really good in really specific situations, but they're too situational to rank any higher than E. Same thing with the stealth ones, the arrow ones, the consumable ones. These are actually good in a specific build, but because they're so situational and niche, they, in my opinion, can't rank higher than E. Same thing with all of these resist talismans. The resist talismans can be very useful, but again, they're very situational. And something that further that I would say is that things are going to rank lower because they're not to be intended to be used frequently. The way so all of these in their these by their very design rely on us to get hit in order to maximize their use, and we want to be hitting opponents both in PvP and PvE more than we are getting hit. It's inherently against our interest to run these talismans, though especially against certain bosses, these can really make a difference. So just because they're an E doesn't mean that they're useless. We also have down here we have the fire and lightning charms. These are just too situational. Again, you can use them if you're trying to do a pure fire build, but if you're doing, this one can work if you're doing, just fire incantations and fire weapons. This could work if you're doing just lightning incantations and lightning weapons, but they definitely rank a lot worse than these other two, and I'll explain why when we get there. In our D tier here, we have items that are, again, just fairly weak overall. The Rotten Insignia. Players seem to really like these get extra damage for multiple attacks charms. They are decent and they can be pretty good in PvE, especially. If you're able to keep up the status over time, you're getting constant attacks on a boss. It can really let you spiral and have, like, I believe it's up to 12% bonus damage. Let's go check this out here. Yeah, so it caps out at 13% extra bonus damage, which is a really good amount of damage. But it requires you to hit quite a lot of attacks, and then you need to keep hitting attacks in order to keep up that damage buff. So it's just inconsistent, and but there's definitely specific uses, especially if you're running like curved swords or something. This definitely could be good for you if you can consistently keep it up. The extra defense at high HP item here, the Ritual Shield Talisman, is just ranked here. Again, it has some uses, but the raised attack talisman is simply better. The stamina regen can be useful, but its stamina is just so ubiquitous in this game. If there's a specific reason that you need more stamina regen, obviously this is good. That's why it's in D tier. It's usable. But Yeah, overall, it's not going to be that useful. Again, Hammer Talisman says enhances stamina, reducing attacks against blockers. Again, Hammer, this is a very, very situational thing. Um, and most times, both in PvP and PvE, this talisman isn't going to give you the edge over a shielding opponent that you really need. There are just lots of other more clean ways of dealing with shielding opponents. It boosts stamina damage by only about 20%. And the only real case, especially in PvP, where we would look at this is like against a fingerprint shield user, and 20% extra is just not a lot against a user like that. Here, Axe Talisman is, again, just very situational, and it only gives you 10% extra damage, so there's just like better uses for this slot. But if you can stack this talisman with other things to just do a whole bunch of charged attack effects so that you could get something interesting. That's why it's not ranked lower, but it's definitely not very good. Twin Blade Talisman, again, it has very situational use, but it has a nice 20% extra damage for the final hit of an attack chain. This is particularly good on weapons that have low numbers of attacks. I'm thinking about halberds, for example. I believe only have a 4 attack chain. And so you'll be able to proc this a lot more consistently. This is definitely a PvE thing, not a PvP thing. This one again is here because it has a really nice damage buff in 20%, and guard counters are actually very strong in PvE in my opinion. But guard counters, I mean, and actually, you know what? I've been convinced also that guard counters can be pretty effective in PvP. But again, it's a fairly inconsistent amount of damage, and they're just like other things that we want to put in that slot. These last two here, the Shouting Talisman, I've seen people using shouts in PvP, and equipping this gives you a good damage boost on those abilities, so it's worth considering. But it's not super strong. But if you're able to make consistent use of it, it could be. And this one, healing on critical hits, is just really good in PvE. It can sustain you through specific sections. I've used this quite a lot to get through difficult sections of the game, just to heal up off of opponents, just critically striking them with my fists over and over again until I'm healed. Stuff like that. I think it just has some fun use cases, so it's ranked in D. Moving up to C now, we have the Graven Mass and Phlox Canvas Talisman, right? Phlox Canvas Talisman, yeah. They come with a just straight up flat 8% buff. So again, these are ranked fairly high because they're just ultra consistent. So each of these is just giving you a straight up 8% damage increase, and as they both note, these stack multiplicatively with other buffs. In this category, we have both the scarabs, the gold and the silver scarab. Again, these are just really useful talismans. That's why I felt they fit in C. They're useful almost all the time. Getting free boosts to item discovery and runes is just useful in a lot of parts of the game. Obviously, they're PvE oriented, but they're both very, very, very useful for PvE and for grinding items and stuff. So they got to be at least C tier in my opinion. Then we have the Sacred Scorpion and the Magic Scorpion charms. You take a bit of extra damage to get, I believe it's 15%. Here. Increases magic attack power 12% and 8% in PvP. The reason that these are ranked higher above the other ones is that these are more usable, and I've seen them used in specific builds, like the Coated Sword builds, or specifically Holy Damage builds, or specifically Magic builds. These can be slotted in for some nice, again, really consistent damage. You have a magic weapon, throwing incantations. This is really powerful. If you have a holy weapon with holy incantations, casting this, very powerful. Especially the holy weapons. There are 2 holy weapons that deal pure holy, so they get the full benefit of this item, which is really nice. Moving up to B tier here, we're going to start going just talisman by talisman, because each of these kind of deserves kind of a full breakdown, except for we'll group all of these ones together. The Great Shield Talisman. The Great Shield Talisman, to be honest, is one of the talismans that I don't see anybody talking about. It's very weird. I don't know why nobody's talking about it. In my opinion, the Great Shield Talisman is maybe like I'm rating it in B tier because I don't think that it has a ton of use cases, but I definitely could see a world where it moves up a tier even into A tier. So what it does essentially is we can look here. It says it boosts your guard boost rating by 1.1, essentially 10%. Guard boosts affects the amount of stamina damage that you take. Specifically, I think that the Great Shield Talisman combined with some of the medium shields is really excellent in PvP. I've seen a couple opponents using this with one of those like heavier medium shields, like the brass shield, for example, and then using guard counters in PvP. And I was like very surprised at how effective that could be. The guard counters come out very quickly. And so I think that this and medium shields, or this and great shields, I think is very. I mean, great shields, frankly, are just like really, really powerful in PvP and in PvE, and this makes them even stronger. And if you don't want to use great shields, this is a way to really buff up the stamina reduction um, of your shields in PvP and PvE. Godfrey icon. So originally I had Godfrey's icon rated a lot lower, but I was convinced that it is a lot better than I thought. So Godfrey icon says enhances charged spells and skills. So it increases damage of charged spells and weapon skills by 15%. So one of the reasons that this is rated highly is Godfrey's icon can be used on multiple different builds with multiple different focuses. You can use it on your sorcery build and fully charge your spells to get a nice 15% damage increase for nothing. This one is rated a little bit lower than some of the other ones, despite that nice 15% damage buff, because again, it is situational. We have to fully charge them, and especially in PvP or even in PvE, we're not always going to want to charge our skills. We might just want to throw off a really quick version and then get a dodge roll or something. So it is a little more situational, but the amount of damage that you get is very nice. The next one we have up here in B tier is the Ritual Sword Talisman. Again, the Ritual Sword Talisman is pretty nice. The Ritual Sword Talisman is another item that is very powerful, but again is very situational. You gain increased attack power when your HP is at maximum. Something that may not be immediately apparent with this talisman is that this also raises the damage of your spells and incantations. It essentially gives you a flat, I believe it's between 10 and 12%. I think people haven't actually figured it out quite yet. And so this is just so it's rated this highly because it's just a flat across all categories damage increase. But the truth is, in both PvP and PvE, it's difficult to stay at full HP. And for those reasons, it only is sitting in B tier, but it definitely is powerful. I see a lot of people using this and then doing quick swapping from ritual. Once they take their first hit, swapping the Ritual Sword Talisman over to Sacred Dew Talisman, which we'll go over later, to get some regen. So it definitely, again, good but situational. So Lord of Blood's Exaltation increases attack power by 20% for 20 seconds when a nearby player or enemy is inflicted with blood loss. So this one is really good. Again, for a lot of the same reasons that Ritual Sword Talisman is good, Lord of Blood Exaltation is really good. It just has really crazy numbers. It's 20% of all attack power is increased when there's blood loss near you. So this is really strong in PvP and in PvE. You can get a blood loss off on your opponent. You just get a free instant 20% damage increase. In PvE, it's very easy against a boss to get a bleed proc. Even if you're not using a bleed build, picking up a Uchigatana and doing dex or just the innate blood buildup on your Moonveil can give you a blood proc, and then you get, again, 20% damage for 20 seconds. You can proc this, then step away and cast a bunch of spells with that extra damage. There's just lots of different ways of using this. This one isn't higher than B because, again, it is very situational and tends towards a very specific bleed build. But it is really good. Another one of its weaknesses is that it doesn't allow you to have this buff at the beginning of the fights. You actually need a condition in order to get the buffs. But the buff is so strong that it's rated this highly. So it is somewhat inconsistent, but yeah, it's very strong. For a lot of the same reasons, we have Kindred of Rot's Exaltation here. Poisoning or rot in vicinity increases your attack power. Based on testing, it's basically exactly the same as Lord of Blood's Exaltation. It gives you a 20% buff for 20 seconds after you poison or rot in the vicinity. Frankly, if bleed wasn't so strong, I would rate this higher. One of the things you can do, I believe, is you can if you eat the raw meat dumpling, this instantly procs your own Kindred of Rot's exaltation. And so you can instantly proc it on yourself and then use the buff immediately to fight your opponent. The only difference is that both poison and Scarlet Rot are just simply worse than bleed in the current state of the game. So we can't really rate it higher than the Lord of Blood Exaltation, but it's very good, and they both do stack with each other as well. We'll just go over this one super shortly. Blue Dancer's Charm is in B tier only because there's a very specific build that makes use of this, and the Blue Dancer's Charm, I believe, gives you up to 13%. Blue Dancer's Charm is one of the weirdest items, to be honest, but basically, so as it says, the damage bonus is not based on percentage, but on the actual number. So if your equip load is higher than 30, the talisman has no effect. Lighter weapon, also, it has some weird math in that some lighter weapons seem to receive higher percent damage bonus than heavier ones. Just remember, if you want to use this, by the way, just make sure you can equip this together with your items just to check how much bonus damage you're getting. You can equip and unequip the Blue Dancer Charm to see exactly how much it does. But anyway, there's a very specific build that uses this very effectively, and it gives you quite a big damage buff. So that's why it's here. The Claw Talisman is here specifically for the twin blade jumping builds. I can't rate this higher than B. Again, has a 15% damage increase and is very easy to consistently proc, because all you need to do, especially in PvE, is just do jumping attacks over and over again. Personally, I would warn against this in PvP because I think jump attacks are actually rather hard to land properly. But and you don't want to, in PvP, you don't want to be spamming the same move over and over again, because your opponent will learn how to read and adapt to what you're doing. But especially in PvE, this is just a function in a specific kind of build. It functions as a basically just flat 15% damage increase, so it can be very good. We have the Red Feathered Branch Sword as our last item in B tier here. The Red Feathered Branch Sword is, again, it's very situational, but the buff is very high. You get a flat 20% damage increase on everything. This is here because it is like a staple of no hit runs. It's a staple of kind of specific challenge runs as well. And in PvE, the damage bonus is so consistent and consistent across an entire wide array of movesets that it can be very strong in very specific circumstances. But generally speaking, letting yourself get it to 20% HP is a death sentence in most cases, and it is completely useless in PvP. But because of how strong the buff is, because of how you can manipulate that in PvP, it's in B tier. Okay, and now we're on to the A tier of talismans here. We're going to start things off with the Erdtree Talisman +2. Both the Erdtree Talisman +2 and the Cerulean Amber Talisman are two talismans that I definitely did not understand how powerful they are until I started using them myself. Both of these are very powerful because they add percentage-based HP. When you can hit the soft cap of 60 vigor and then get huge amounts of bonuses from both of these things. Obviously, Erdtree's favor, giving you equip load and stamina as well, is very nice. The equip load especially is really nice because it takes care of itself, its own equip load, so it's functionally weightless. That's why these two are at the top of A, and why I even rank them above one of my favorite talismans, which is Radagon's Soreseal. I think Radagon's Soreseal is an item that is not very well understood by a lot of people. Radagon's Soreseal makes you take about 9% more damage, but gives you, roughly 10% more damage, but you get roughly 9% more HP from the 5 vigor that you get. So that almost always offsets. Then you get endurance, strength, and dexterity out of this. So there are a lot of builds and situations where this is just 20 free stats, and especially like if you are playing in PvP, That is huge. Getting 20 free stats on specific builds is very, very, very important. I think people are sleeping on it because of the fact that you take some extra damage. There's also some special consideration in that the damage reduction actually is even more decreased if you have higher damage reduction. But my mind has been changed, and I actually have put these two above Radigan's Sourceal, but I still think it's a very powerful. If you're going to go past a level 200 or 250 or so, then I think Radigan's starts falling off. The Spear Talisman is very good. To quickly explain how it works, during certain animations, like when you're dodge rolling, in a specific window, your pierce damage reduction goes down. What the Spear Talisman does is it further reduces the pierce damage negation, basically just increasing the amount of damage you get to do with spear type weapons in that specific window. So this is another one that is very consistent, very powerful, definitely more powerful in PvP. But you're already, as a spear user, you are trying to roll catch your opponents. You're trying to catch them in those windows already. And so being able to do a huge amount of extra bonus damage is very valuable. Radigan's Icon has to be up here. And it's, I believe, yeah, it's the highest rated sorcery talisman for very good reason. Because equipping Radigan's Icon effectively gives you 40 dexterities worth of spell casting speed, which is a massive bonus to casting speed. There are reasons why you wouldn't run it, but it is just very, very powerful, being able to cast faster, being able to link spells to each other faster. It's just a super powerful talisman. Millicent's Prosthesis, Star of Scourge Heirloom, Stargazer Heirloom, and the Two Fingers Heirloom are all here because they are, again, consistency is such a huge value for talismans. So these are all talismans that are going to give you consistent value. Millicent's is up here because it's a strictly better version than the Prosthesis Wearer's Amulet, but this one is going to also gives you the additional attacks buff. So it's just strictly better and belongs here. Each of these is just giving you 5 free stats. Again, these are extremely powerful, especially in PvP builds, but they are somewhat situational, but they are always giving you consistent value, so they're worth considering. The Blessed Dew Talisman is an extremely powerful talisman. It's very slept on. I don't see a lot of people talking about it. It's very powerful because you can, especially if you're running, say, the Cerulean Amber one, as soon as you've been hit a little bit, you do a quick swap between this and Sacred Dew, and then you start regenning HP. It's very good in both PvP and PvE because it's just, again, it's very consistent over time value. But there are reasons why we might not want to run it, but it has a very powerful effect, and that's why it's in A tier. Okay, and last but not least, we're going to talk about the 4 talismans that are in S tier. They should be fairly obvious just looking at them, but we'll go over them really quickly. Bullgoat's Talisman reduces incoming poise damage by 25%. This is really powerful in both PvP and PvE. It just means getting staggered a lot less. And especially in PvP, this can really mean the difference between winning and losing, or trading with an opponent and not trading. This is something that you have to have experience in to know why it's so powerful, but it is very powerful. The Great Jar's Arsenal is very powerful in a lot of the same reasons why Erdtree is powerful. You just get a bunch of free equip load, which is very powerful because you can turn that equip load into anything that you want. More stats, more armor, more weapons. Again, both of these are powerful because they are useful on basically every build, because equipping it means you can equip more armor, which gives you more resists, and it's just super consistent and valuable. Third one here is the Dragoncrest Great Shield Talisman. This one gives you 20% damage reduction in PvE and 5% damage reduction in PvE. And again, it's a very powerful one because it's useful in almost every single context. There's some argument to be said that this maybe should be dropped lower because some of these other talismans take priority over this, especially in PvP. But because it gives you a flat 20% in PvE, it's extremely powerful and worth using pretty much all the time as soon as you get it. And then last but not least, we have Alexander's Jar Shard. Alexander's Jar Shard is so powerful. Arguably the most powerful, depending on your build. It just gives a 15% damage bonus to all Ashes of War, and that's crazy. Again, one of the things we've talked about a lot in this list is consistency consistent upgrades in power and consistent ability to use those abilities means something that is ranked higher. So Ashes of War are already extremely powerful in this game. So just getting a 15% increase on those Ashes of War is very, very powerful, both in PvP and PvE. In PvE, you're going to be able to make consistent use of this because you can just use your Ash of War over and over again. This is powerful on basically every build in the game. Faith, intelligence, strength. This is useful on almost all of them. And it has a very consistent damage output. Whereas even some of these other ones, like Lord of Blood's Exaltation, which gives more damage percentage, needs a requirement in order to get that buff. So, and it only works for one specific kind of build. You definitely could run a bleed build that runs both Lord of Exaltation and Alexander Jarshard. And this is why Alexander Jarshard is so much higher. A lot of the ones I would say, again, this is just so people understand, a lot of the ones in this list can be used to great effect when combined together, and especially in specific circumstances. So this is trying to take a somewhat objective stance and looking at it from an outside perspective about which is the most consistent, which is the most valuable. Each of these are going to change in terms of value for your specific build. But yeah, there we go. That is the full Talisman tier list breakdown. Please let me know in the comments below whether you guys agree or disagree. And I would love to hear about your arguments about why certain ones should be ranked a little bit higher. But thanks for listening and have a good one.